Okay, we are live, everyone. Thank you for joining Frightmare HQ. My name is Loyd Cryer. I'm here with my co-host, Charles Doze, up in your upper
Hey,
left-hand corner. What's up,
that's
Charles?
me.
Right
What's up,
below...
Lloyd? What's happening?
No, not a lot, man. We are ready for this show. We've got right below you in the square, directly below you, is Chris Rowe. This is George Romero's talent manager and longtime friend. And then right below me, right here, is Daniel Kraus, author, actually New York Times best-selling author. That's a great title.
That's how you should introduce yourself all the time, Daniel. Everywhere you
Yeah.
go.
So of course, of course I do.
Well, welcome to the show, Daniel and Chris. We're glad to have both of you on today.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, Daniel,
We're here to
you
talk about
are.
something fun.
We're going to talk about something fun. Daniel, like I said, he's New York Times best-selling author. He co-authored *The Shape of Water* and *Trollhunters* with Guillermo del Toro, and
hmm
um, and it was adapted into a Emmy-winning Netflix series. But today we're going to talk about something which is what they're calling a posthumous collaboration with legendary filmmaker George A. Romero. The book is called The Living Dead, and it comes out August 4th, this Tuesday. How excited are you about that?
I'm very excited. I mean, for me, this is the culmination of an entire lifetime of interest and fascination with George Romero. I grew up with George Romero films like a lot of kids grew up with Star Wars. Like it was sort of the universe in which my mind, it was the playground in which my imagination took took me. So starting with about 5 or 6 years old, uh, I saw Night of the Living Dead for the first time. My mom was a horror fan, and although some would say that was bad parenting, I would argue that that was the best parenting
I agree.
because I mean, it really, there are a lot of things you can get super involved with as a kid, and most of them, and they're fine. I mean, whether you're into Star Wars or He-Man or whatever was your thing back then. But I feel really lucky that my thing, as it were, was George Romero and also Twilight Zone. Those two things really guided me as a young person, and I think those two creators, George and Rod Serling, were so forward thinking and so ahead of their time in so many ways, and so progressive in interesting, fascinating ways, that I feel really lucky that those are the artists that I latched onto. So yeah, the publication of this book is for me the closing of a lifelong circle.
That's
I have to
amazing.
agree. I have to agree with what you're saying, though. I mean, Rod Serling and Romero to me were two people who sort of influenced just about every pop culture thing that came down the road. So, totally agree with you there.
Yeah, my mom was a horror fan as well, and she used to take me to see horror movies all the time. And you're right, you do get those weird, looks where people go, "Your mom used to take you to see those." But I always thought it was good parenting too. Horror is an intelligent genre.
Yeah.
And I really that's my thing is horror, and it's because of her. Chris, how did all of this come about? When did George begin writing these books or this book?
Well, it's an interesting story. In 2008, I had put together a deal for George uh, with a publisher, Grand Central Publishing, and it was to write two original novels. And um, once the offer came through, which was like 20 pages, you know the type of contract, Daniel. George looked at it, and George, always being George, was like, "Oh, I don't like all these limitations, and I don't know, I don't like this, and I like that. I'd rather just write the book and just give it to them. That way, if they don't like it, I don't have to give the advance back." I mean, there were all of these thoughts that would go through his head, and I was like, "They're not going to take the advance back. They're salivating for this. They want it." But George, being George, that's what he did. So the deal just kind of sat on the table, and it lingered and it lingered. And then George had a stroke. in 2010. And of course, everything stopped, and it took a few years for him to get back. But he had started to work on probably 2013. He kind of come back to it and had started to fiddle with it a little bit. His original idea had changed a bit. He made some adjustments to it, and he began writing. And I was excited, but he was a great procrastinator. So he'd start something, then he'd be distracted and go to something else. And so it just sat there, and it sat there. And finally, I had this list of things that I really felt like I needed to dive into with him in 2016, late 2016. And he went away for the holidays, as he always did, in December. And then we were going to like reconvene, regroup, and start working out projects and things to work on. George, that last year or two, had really had a different mindset. Whereas before, you know, he wanted things to be projects that he had created. Now he was starting, I had gotten him to bend a little bit and consider doing executive producing of projects, you know, doing George Romero Presents projects, those sorts of things. Because obviously with him having the health issues he'd had a few years earlier, he needed to just chill. And I was concerned, you know, if he'd be able to get out there and really do it, direct another movie. So he kind of started to think that way. And he went away for the holidays, came back, and then started to not feel well in early 2017. And then discovered a short while later he had cancer, and he passed very quickly. So for me, immediately, still taking care of the estate as I do, I immediately looked at what projects George had that we could do something with without attachments of other people who helped develop it. And this book was something that I was always really passionate about getting made. And I had reached out to Daniel, who I had gotten to introduce to George back in 2005. And I had followed Daniel, and he and I had kept in touch. And I just said, hey, you know, would you be interested in this? Which he had hinted for a while. He really wanted to do some kind of collaboration with George. And that's who I said I wanted to do it. And I took it to Suzanne, George's wife. And, you know, she trusts me implicitly. And Daniel got it, and he's finished it in the same tone and style that George wrote, which was really important. And because George, there's a rhythm to George's writing, and to his humor, and to just the way he talked about his social commentary and all of that. And Daniel nailed it, and I'm proud of him. And I have to say, Daniel, I didn't know that Night of the Living Dead had that kind of an impact on you. Daniel and I went to school together. We grew up in this little town in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa called Fairfield, Iowa. And Daniel was a year behind me in school, and I was in the same class with his sister. But I didn't know that until years later. You said George was such an inspiration, but I didn't know it went that far back. Had I known that, just think about all the cool things we could have done in school.
I know. I mean, it really is one of the most bizarre stories, as far as, you know, we're both from this small town in Iowa. Yeah. And we both kind of, you know, we graduate, go our separate ways, and have our own careers. And then decades later, circle back on this thing. It's pretty incredible.
It is. And it actually, that's what made it really special for me, was to get to really work, you know, in this business. I'm a bit like George when it comes to who do you trust? And there was an immediate comfort level that I had with Daniel, because we'd known each other since we were kids. We didn't hang out when we were kids. I mean, if we'd see each other, we'd, hey, Daniel, how you doing? Yeah. But I had great respect for Daniel and trust, and he came from a great family, and I just felt comfortable kind of putting this in his lap. to work on, and it was the best decision that I've made on anything that's come after George's passing. Was this? I think Daniel's great, and he brings a lot to it, and it does just get me every time I think of the fact that, you know, we were kind of two nerdy kids from a little town in Iowa, in the middle of a goddamn cornfield, and then years later we're doing this, and we're on this show with Loyd and the man there, Charles.
Yep, that's me. Well, Daniel, I mean, I can imagine that having to finish anybody's work is a difficult task, but when you get the task of finishing Romero's work, what's the first thoughts that go through your head? Are you like, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, at first I was sort of stunned by the opportunity, but my reaction to big challenges like this is and it's the only way I can convince myself to proceed and not be paralyzed, is to fake myself out with confidence, and say, all right, I'm going to do this. It's like I'm a minor league baseball player and being called up to the big leagues. And it's like, all right, I've been training for this. Put me in, coach. I got this. And just to attack it like it's something that I am definitely the right guy for. Whether or not I am, I don't really deep down know that. But so I just try to pump myself up with as much confidence as possible and get right to work. And for this, I got right to work. Everything else I was working on, and I've got a million other projects, got pushed to the side. And I started studying. And of course, I know George's work inside and out, but I took it to a whole different level. Obviously watched everything again, watched it yet again with commentary tracks, looked for every interview I could find with him. The more obscure, the better. Had long talks with Chris. I spent a whole day with Suze, his wife, really digging into everything that I didn't know about George. You know, what his beliefs were, what he loved and hated, what was his thoughts on religion and the afterlife and politics and all these things, with the idea being that I really wanted to be able to when I came to a fork in the road narratively, I wanted to be able to my best of my ability, be able to guess which way George would go, because I didn't have, you know, I had elements of George's work, and interestingly, not everything was right in the beginning. He wrote a big chunk in the beginning, but there are a few things that clearly belong a little later. And so to bridge all those gaps, I really wanted to almost create like a George AI, you know, something where I could always sort of have the best chance of guessing where he was going to go or where he would have gone. And that was really important to me because in a collaboration, you know, I've done a couple others with Guillermo. What's important is you have that friction, and I don't mean that in a bad sense, is you want to be able to thump up against somebody when you're collaborating. That's the whole purpose, is that you've got two minds and you're going to choose different directions sometimes. And you want that. You want to be able to challenge yourself to have two artists working at the same time. And, you know, you're not always going to want to do the same thing. And that it's sort of like independent filmmaking and being more creative when you have a lower budget. It's like you have to make yourself creative to work with another artist. And not having George around, I had to kind of create these obstacles for myself, so that I could always be bumping up against George as the best that I could understand him.
That's crazy.
How much of the book was finished by George when you got it?
I would say overall, somewhere between a third and a half. Once you add his notes in, and at some point Chris Rowe in a amazing discovery dug up this 9 or 10 page letter that detailed where he was going with some of the plot threads. So once you add that to it, it's a good 50% of the book, and it was and for me it was just an absolute thrill. Like when Chris found that letter, I was already deep into work on the book. And so on the one hand, it was this giant pain in the ass because suddenly I had all this new information, but it was, I mean that in the absolute best of ways, because it was always a thrill to have to rework this puzzle of this novel. And One of the interesting things I did with Suze was I got a list from her of all of George's favorite things, his favorite music, his favorite movies, and I studied those. So I studied Tales of Hoffman, his favorite film. I studied The Quiet Man, various other art that wasn't really important to him. And then I tried to identify in that art what was inspiring George, and then try to be inspired by that same art so that I could dip from the same well that he had been dipping from.
Well, it sounds incredibly like an incredibly daunting task, but at the same time,
Yeah.
for a fan like as you are, to be able to step into his mind must have been exhilarating.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's even looking at the book, and I've got a copy sitting right here, I almost still can't believe it. I almost still can't believe that there's this product that I worked together with my hero, my idol. So yeah, it was daunting, but the pressure never came from the Romero estate. It didn't come from Suze and Chris. They were extremely trusting and giving at every turn. The pressure came from myself. The pressure was self-imposed because I was going to treat this as if it were a half-finished Michelangelo or something. Like I treated it with the utmost seriousness and wanted to go as deep as I could in every sense of story and character and themes.
One of the things that, it's one thing to be a fan and you get to do something like that. Lots of people get opportunities to meet their favorite person, or even as filmmakers get to collaborate with, their favorite actor but in this, it's one thing to get to do that and give it your 100%. But it's another thing entirely to be able to match up the tone and style and still maintain the essence of what George wrote without straying too far in a different direction. And that's what Daniel did. And that's not easy. It's really not an easy thing to do. It's really hard. In Hollywood, all the time, you'll have someone who will come in and pick up a script where someone else left off. And they almost have to go back to square one again and just kind of start from scratch because the other person is too present still. I've been on sets where actors have been fired and suddenly they've hired a new actor, and that actor's take on it was so different from the material written that the writers had to get together and go, wow, he's actually taken it in a way I didn't expect it to go, and then had to start tweaking all the other parts. And I think that is the beauty of what Daniel was able to do. There's lots of great writers out there, but I don't think that just every writer who's a great writer could just step in and do that, regardless of how many New York Times bestsellers they have. And Daniel did that, and that's why I'm so proud of it. And for me, there are, I walk by and I see it on my shelf, or I see them around, and I'm sometimes in awe myself still, because momentarily I'll forget that it was written. And then all of a sudden there it is as a reminder. And I couldn't be prouder of what Daniel did with it, because he kept with the essence of what George had written. And that's something that was very important to myself and to Suzanne. And that's important with all the writing, all the projects that we have that George left us with. The projects that were never produced or partially written, any of those partially written projects, again, screenplays, we have to make sure that however they are completed, if they're completed, that essence is maintained evenly throughout. Any projects that get turned from script into film, it's about maintaining the essence of George. After George passed, I had many calls from, D-level producers contacting me, offering lots of money for the use of George's name, or what do you have in the treasure chest? And I knew that regardless of what they were offering, there was no way I would go down that road, because it was just to get his name or just to get a title so they could then turn it into whatever they wanted to, and it would be a piece of crap. And again, proud of Daniel because he nailed it, and that was very important.
Well, without giving anything away, of course, no spoilers. What can you tell us? Can you tell us about what the book is about, or give us some kind of insight? Is it a sequel in any way? Does it have anything to do with previous Romero works?
No, not explicitly. It reboots the zombie uprising to day one in a similar way to the way George did it with Diary of the Dead. So it takes us to day one, and the book is in 3 acts, which it really is sort of modeled after Tales of Hoffmann, to kind of go back to how I found inspiration, which was that opera also unspools in 3 acts. The first act takes place in the 2 weeks following the uprising. So you're introduced to about, I'd say, 5 different groups of characters. Being general and vague here, there's a couple people working in a morgue. There's some people on a aircraft carrier. There's a cable news station, and there's a girl living in a trailer park in Missouri. And you get to see sort of minute by minute how they're reacting to everything. Now, what's interesting structurally is that although this has no explicit ties to any of his films covered years 0 through 5 of the zombie epidemic. And if you wanted to sort of get the whole George Romero experience, you could read the first act of the book, stop, watch his 6 zombie films, and then read act 2 and 3 of the book and sort of get the whole 15-year spectrum of the ebb and flow of his ongoing zombie story. Because this book does go into year 15, so it goes a good decade further into the future than his movies did. And eventually the characters do intersect. And there's a couple through line characters, including, most fascinating to me, a zombie character. The manuscript that I was working with from George had chapters from a zombie's point of view, which was really fascinating to me. And I think really the first time we get that perspective from George. And so there's a certain zombie that he was clearly in his manuscript found very important. And I guess she belongs in the lineage of a bub type character. And she's present. She's woven through the entire 15-year story. And she's a minor character in a way, but thematically a really important character that pays off at the very end.
That's awesome.
That sounds great. Again, when you were doing this, what's the hardest part about George when you were writing? Is it his like social commentary he likes to hide and stuff? Was it his style? What was the hardest thing for you to tackle?
That's a great question. I mean, George was such a father figure to me as a kid, and that he's almost baked into my DNA in a way, so that a lot of the things came fairly naturally. I didn't have a huge everything was hard, but it wasn't like impossibly hard to mesh our styles. I figured that out after a while. His tendency towards social commentary, again, I grew up on it, so it's naturally something I do. The hardest thing for me was cutting anything that George wrote, because there was such a finite amount of material from him that anytime you have a collaboration, there's going to be little bits that somebody writes that the other person isn't going to be able to figure out. And in editing, there's always things to get cut. And so there was very little that we had to cut, but there's always something that just doesn't work once the big puzzle comes together. So anytime I had to cut even a little bit of George's stuff out, that always hurt. That was hard because I just loved it, so much. Yeah. So again, that was pretty rare, but it always happens in books, and that was always hard.
Yeah. I put a graphic up of the reviews. The book has got some amazing reviews, starting with Joe Hill, who says it's a horror landmark of gory genius. And then Clyde Barker says, like a lost Romero classic. How does that make you feel to see reviews from people like that in the genre that we all look up to?
I mean, I feel great about it. I mean, especially Clive. He was someone who I read. You know, like a lot of kids, I started in maybe 5th or 6th grade reading Stephen King, and he was very, you know, from just like a kid in the Midwest, he was very approachable. And as far as a reader, right, reading a book, he was very understandable and approachable. But it's Clive Barker's books that blew my brain open. Like that's like reading his stuff in middle school, I think is when I finally picked up Clive Barker. This wasn't, there's something comfortable about Stephen King's books. That was not Clive Barker's MO.
Yeah.
He was out to blow your mind. And the wildness, the unchecked wildness and lushness of his ideas, and his the way he'd play with fantasy and horror and gender, and I mean all these things that as a kid were all brand new to me. He shook me up in a way that nobody had yet. So it's, to get words like that from Clive Barker, I mean, that means a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. The book is, we want to remind everybody, the book is available for pre-order right now. I've got the cover up right now. It's a great looking cover. And
I will. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. But if you pre-order it before it goes on sale, and it goes on sale on Tuesday, but if you pre-order it before that, you can get an exclusive poster from the publisher that will not be available on Tuesday. But if you do it before then, you can go to their site, upload your receipt from wherever you bought it, and you get something free.
I have that graphic, and I just put that up as well. Pre-order a copy and upload your receipt to receive an 11x17 poster. Guys, the link to do that and to redeem that is in the description of this video. So if you want to get that poster, the link is there. You can go check it out. Is there anywhere that you prefer or people to pre-order this, or anywhere is fine with you as long as they buy it?
I mean, I always am a fan of your local bookstore. But you know, order it from wherever you need to order it from. You know, it's for some people.
We're in the age of COVID, so it might be
yeah.
from Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
Oh yeah. I'm not advocating. You don't necessarily. I'm not making you walk into a bookstore, but your local bookstore might have online ordering. There's a place in Chicago called Mad Street Books that's near me. So if you order from them, for example, and tell them you want it signed and personalized, I can actually do that. So I would mention that one store just because I can sign it to you if you order from them.
There is somewhere that's selling pre-autographed copies, right?
It's probably them.
Is that who it is? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll try to find that link and get it up for you.
I want nothing more than to speak to Daniel in a couple of days and hear that he's incredibly wore out. His hand doesn't work because he's been signing books for days upon days.
Yeah, I'm heading down to that store on Monday night to do some signing. So get your orders in before then, and I'll sign it to you.
That's awesome.
That is awesome.
I understand that we are going to give away a couple of signed copies here on the show as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody remember that. We'll do that in here in a couple of minutes, and give those books away and find somebody. So don't forget, we'll ask some trivia or something about that and get everybody. Maybe we'll ask them to mention something that you've already said here.
Yeah. So I guess going off Romero again, Chris and Daniel both. I think both of you, have you both seen Romero's amusement park? Because I still want to see it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was in New York.
It was played at the MoMA, right? Are we going to see it soon, Chris? Is it coming for us? I want to see it.
Well, we have a distribution deal. I can't say too much about it because it's just happening, but there's a distribution deal on the table that looks really good. And it's, I think we'll have something pretty soon to release to everyone about it. It's exciting because, you know, I was with George for 16 years almost, and I never heard about this. He never discussed it. I knew nothing about it. And then so suddenly to find it, and of course the first thing that goes through your mind is, oh my God, a horror film called an amusement park. Very different type of horror film. It's not what you think. I mean, it's really kind of real life horror, so to speak, and it really puts this interesting spotlight on how our seniors and our elderly, how they're treated. It's very interesting, and when you sit there and you watch it, it's just as relevant right now today in 2020 as it was when it was made, even more so now. And that's the great thing about anything that George does. When you can watch something and see the relevance in it, and 15 years, 20 years later, that relevance is even more important and even more of an issue now. You go, wow, this guy really could pick up on these social commentaries that existed then and presented them in a way to make you really think about what's going on. And anyways, it was beautiful. It was very emotional to be there at MoMA and to see it in its entirety. And Daniel, where did you see it?
Yeah, I saw it before it was restored, so I haven't seen it in its full glory yet. So, I mean, I saw the whole cut; it was all there, but it was, faded and aged.
It was sent to me. I did not want to see it like that. I wanted to at least see it in its finished form, and so I held off.
But I can tell you, even in its faded, crackled form, it was exciting to see. Chris is right; it's not technically a horror film, but it is horrifying. It is really a disturbing film, and he shot it around the time he shot The Crazies, and it has that kind of editing energy where it's all shot in this bright sunlight, so there's something very assaultive about it. Like there's these fast cuts and kind of distorted close-ups, and the sound design is loud and ever changing, and it's really unsettling. I think it's a major rediscovery.
That's amazing. And
it's a discovery, like really important discovery. What I like is that will it be as commercially successful? No. It's an old film. There will be some folks who find it completely boring and uninteresting. But for people who really get Romero, and there's two levels to that. You have those people who just go, oh, I love the blood and guts and I love all of that stuff. And then there are those people who really dive in and see the layers to George's work, because his work is made up of layers. And if you sit back and you look at it clearly and really pay attention, you'll start to see those layers, and you'll start to see things that go, wow. And that's what this movie is. I do find it very disturbing. Those are my exact words. Disturbing and so sad.
It's really sad.
That it's a topic of taking care of our seniors and our elderly and our disabled citizens, that it's even an issue in 2020. And clearly it was an issue in 1972 when he made it. And you would think that all this time later there would be something different. And the reality is, it hasn't changed. It really hasn't changed that much at all. And I think it's almost even more frightening if you go to, for instance, Europe. Because over in Europe, where I've spent a lot of time, and I spent a lot of time in Europe with George, nothing is easily accessible if you're elderly there. If you have to use the restroom, you got to go upstairs. You have to climb upstairs, or you have to go downstairs. They don't have ramps. They don't have the ability to be able to just maneuver around the city as well as you can in America. So that's good. But it's pretty scary over in Europe if you've spent any time. I've been with George many places, and as he got older, he would be like, oh no, I'll have them drive me. The walk was going to be too much because it was upstairs, no ramps, cracks in the sidewalks, pebblestone streets where it was a little uneven. And this takes it to a whole new level. So it is disturbing, and it is a type of realism that if you really look at it, you'll see how scary it is.
Yeah, for those not 100% aware, what Chris and I were talking about is a film called The Amusement Park, which George made in the 70s. That's sort of been gone for like 3 decades. It's just been hidden away. So we've been waiting for it. So looking forward to it, Chris. So thanks for telling us a little bit.
4 decades.
Yeah,
Yeah, 4 decades.
There's
4
an
decades,
interesting viewer question here. He says, "Do you have any insight into why Lutheran Services approached Romero to make the amusement park?"
Well, they approached him because they wanted. I mean, it was an issue back then. I mean, it was a social issue back then, and that's why he was approached to do something like that. They wanted to bring attention to the kind of failed system that existed at that time. Everything from you're too old to take these rides. I mean, it's really, there's nothing worse than feeling inside that you can do all of these things and then you're stopped. It's like the little kid who wants to get on the ride, but he's an inch too short to get on it. And in this, they're too old to get on the rides, and they're too old. And it's fascinating. I've spent a lot of time at Disneyland and Disney World and Universal. One of the great joys for me is to see elderly couples there enjoying themselves and holding hands and wearing mouse ears or whatever it is. There's something that I find really beautiful about that. It's youthful, but there's something for everyone there. And even though that's in an amusement park where they make it handicap accessible and all of that, we're really talking about something much deeper, which is just society in general. In the amusement park, I guess in Disney or Universal, you can do those things, but when you get out in the real world, it's still really not that easy. Daniel, do you have anything to say to that?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I'm trying to remember if the Lutheran organization that funded it was Pittsburgh-based. At the time, George was certainly still making other kinds of films, industrial films, and so he was also a director for hire at the time. So it makes sense that they would, especially if they were Pennsylvania-based, they would just turn to him to do it.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
So
amazing.
Daniel, we've spoken about The Living Dead. It's coming out August 4th, this coming Tuesday, but you've been pretty busy lately. It seems like you have other projects that are coming out in September. Is that right?
Yeah, I've had this. I mean, I picked a terrible year to do this, but I have 5 projects coming out within 12 months, which is highly, highly unusual. So The Living Dead is the third of those 5. So in September, I have a book called They Threw Us Away, which is my first book for kids, like elementary school, older elementary school kids. And that's part of a trilogy called the Teddy Saga, which, if you can imagine me writing a book about teddy bears, then that's this book. It's the darkest teddy bear story of all time. And then at the end of September, I have my first comic book coming out from Vault Comics, and it's called The Autumnal, and that's an 8-issue story. It's I'd put it in the subgenre of folk horror.
Okay, all right.
Very familiar. So it's I guess with COVID being a two-edged sword, has it helped you a little bit having to be at home? Is it giving you more time to finish stuff and do these projects?
I mean, that's a great question. And I know authors who it has affected greatly, like they can't get their mind back into their head. It's so out there with all the problems that are going on. I've always approached writing almost like a factory job. I get up early, I sit right here, and I work an 8-hour day. And I'm pretty good about separating myself from the rest of the world. That's why part of what I love about writing so much is that I can sort of be a hermit and not interact. So this has not changed my daily work. Obviously my thoughts are with all sorts of people out there who are suffering. But when it comes down to my work hours, there's little change. I'm still just powering ahead every day.
Right.
That's good.
So, yeah, I'm reading now. It says George A. Romero invented the modern zombie in his seminal film Night of the Living Dead. Without Romero, there would be no World War Z. no Walking Dead. Isn't that the truth? And we owe so much to Romero for changing the genre and it becoming what it is today.
Yeah, not only that, I think he changed the idea of monsters. There was before zombies, most monsters were a thing. There was Dracula, there was Frankenstein, there was Godzilla, whatever. There were these things. The idea of the zombie is everything. It's everyone. It goes from a single point of a monster to an infinite idea of monstrousness that is, in my eyes, the most flexible, malleable metaphor that has ever been posited in horror fiction.
I find it interesting still to this day that, and it's, I guess with all things, George was a pioneer who was way ahead of his time in everything that he did. And unlike most pioneers, they get the credit for having created genres and certain styles of music or whatever, but they rarely ever are financially compensated the right way for it. And I when I sit back and I listen to people say, oh my God, George Romero did this, he was one of my greatest inspirations. And after George died, I heard a lot of this from people. Big directors, really big people. And I listened to the stuff that they said, and at times it made me want to puke, because they're saying so many great things, and yet I know that those people all had production companies. I know that those people many times were offered opportunities to collaborate or produce something, and they all passed. But they were all happy to jump into the spotlight and talk about how wonderful he was. But they didn't want to put the money where their mouth was and do something. And so for that, I say a few expletives and shame on you. And for George, I think what I hope people take from this book, and because I'm very protective of George, and actually you three know that very, very well.
Yes.
We've all worked together for many years. But I hope what people take from this is just what kind of a real, true visionary that George was, and what he gave to the genre. Because you really, if you think about the genre of the last 50 years, you can't imagine the genre without George being a part of it. And I was given an interview the other day, and I said, of all of the directors of that time period, he's the only one with a star on the Walk of Fame. He's the only one that you find his work in museums. I was in Italy last October, and I was at the most fantastic cinema museum that I've ever been to in the world. And there was an entire area dedicated to Night of the Living Dead. The Italians get it, because they always get that sort of thing. So I hope people really take away from this what kind of a great visionary he was. And I hope that we have a lot of stuff in the treasure chest, as I like to call it. And I hope that maybe some of those people who had those wonderful things to say, maybe they're listening, and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is and make some projects that are really great. And who knows, maybe we'll see another Living Dead book, from the brains of Daniel and George again. I would love to. That would be wonderful.
Well, hopefully,
I think
this. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I think Chris makes a really important point. I mean, it's Romero's legacy is scored with opportunities that were taken from him. It's really easy to say this guy was a genius and he affected me. And I think the fans have done him well, and always gave back and showed the love, but the industry didn't. And it's not, and I think it's not only fair, I think it's necessary to remember that, that the people who really loved him and respected him, Chris knows who they are. And a lot of the industry, the Hollywood industry, didn't respect George the way he would. Yet they love to make money off him when they can. But he was a one of a kind guy that it will take. He's one of those guys where we're decades and decades after Night of the Living Dead and still discovering new things about it. It might be 50 years from now that we're all sitting around saying, "Oh my God, Survival of the Dead is this genius work." It's going to take a while, and it's endlessly frustrating as somebody who feels like I sort of understand his work to see it continually misunderstood. But I don't want to be a downer here. There are great things happening. This book, I hope, is a one small piece of a new
beginning.
Hopefully a new beginning, or a small piece of a new beginning where we can begin, where the wider population can begin to reappreciate George for truly the visionary he was. And he was to be able to predict so many things so many decades in advance. You have to be touched by genius just a little bit.
Well, it is a new beginning because this is really the first new item of George's to be made since he passed. I mean, the amusement park isn't new, it's old, and it's not out yet. People will get to see it for the first time. Almost everyone, it will be the first time. But this book really is the beginning of, I hope, a new chapter of Romero, and people will get to discover and see a lot of new things. There's some beautiful work in the pipeline. There's some beautiful projects optioned right now. And it's just a matter of waiting to see, the direction that it goes. But Daniel's right. And I think for years, people will be talking about it. And I'll be old if I'm still around in 50 years. But let's get together and talk about it and have a reflection.
Well, Chris knows
I definitely have to,
the love that I have for Romero, and he's been a guest so many times at Texas Frightmare Weekend, and you also know that the love that the fans have for George. Every time he would come, the lines got bigger and they got longer.
Yep.
And George even said that a couple of times. It
Yeah.
just keeps. I figured people wouldn't care anymore.
I mean,
That's what he would say.
Same like me. Chris knows I love George. I've got George's face tattooed on me, so which George always thought was hilarious. So same here. So I tip my hat to you, Daniel, and I'm much like yourself. Romero is the reason why I'm in this chair, and the reason why I know Loyd, and the reason why we're doing a lot of this stuff. So
That's
I'm
right.
very excited to read this.
George is always on the show with me right here.
There he is.
So, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to read this book. Before we go, let's give away a copy or two. What do you say?
I say yes. Let's do it.
All right. So you mentioned a character earlier in the new book from a state. I want to know from somebody what state you mentioned this character was in. Do you remember this, Charles?
Remember? Can I
You
win
do
it?
remember? Can you win?
I've already pre-ordered mine, so don't worry.
Okay.
Oh.
So I'm looking at the comments here. I'm going to wait until we get somebody that tells me what state was mentioned that this character in the book is from.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah?
I mean, I know the answer, obviously.
I was like, I hope Daniel knows it. He's like, I hope he
Daniel
does.
knows. No, it's well, that's the way we make it here. We make it tough. We're not
You
going to
either make it
easy.
tough or really, we either make it tough or really, really ridiculously easy. There's no in between. What me and Loyd do.
Somebody said Pennsylvania, but that's not the correct answer.
That is not the quick answer.
Logical guess, but no.
That is a logical guess.
That would have been too easy.
It would have been too easy.
Did I make it? Did I make it too
I don't know,
difficult?
Lloyd.
Maybe.
I don't know, Lloyd. Did you? Everybody's out there trying to Google stuff.
They're Googling everything. No, it wasn't. Okay, so we have somebody that says, I think they're going through all the states now. Somebody said
Start
one
naming
of the
them all.
United States. We got Arizona, we got Ohio, we got Iowa. No, Iowa is where Daniel and Chris are from. Mississippi, Louisiana, Minnesota. They're going through all the states. This is hilarious.
I think Daniel and Chris are the most famous people from Iowa ever. They probably have statues of you both there.
Maybe one day.
Yeah, maybe one day.
I'm sure they have one of Chris. Chris probably put it up himself, didn't you, Chris?
Let's give an easier answer. Let's do
All right.
what is the movie that was recently discovered and is going to be re-released, directed by George, that has been hidden away for years and years. Oh, there we go. We got a winner. Stephen Burt said amusement park. There we
Is
go.
that the poster behind you too, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean the answer is right here.
I know, we made it easy. That was
Could not
see, I went
be
from
easier.
extremely difficult to very easy. So, Stephen Burt, you won a copy of the book. Does anybody else? Do y'all have a question, Chris? Chris, you should ask a question and give the second book away.
Oh, Chris knows a lot of Romero questions, don't you, Chris?
Yeah, I do. Name what Daniel mentioned about the book where part of this adventure takes place at sea. What type of vessel at sea does this take place?
There you
Good.
go.
One segment of the book.
Yeah. One segment of the book. What type of vessel did it take place in? I'm watching everyone's comments.
Pop it up.
What do you mean a yacht?
George didn't write about yachts.
No.
No yachts, guys.
Military ship, somebody said. We got a tanker ship. We got an oil rig.
Both
Come
are
on. Come on, Beeble.
close, but both wrong.
Submarine. Battleship.
Submarine. It's not the Hunt for Red October. Come on, guys.
Aircraft carrier.
There you
There
go.
we go.
That was
Boom.
Freddie Arnold got the correct answer. Congratulations, Freddie. Awesome. And
That's
for
great.
everybody else, you do not lose. You are a winner because you can go and order this book anywhere, and and you can even get a copy signed, whatever suits your fancy. Go out and just get the book.
I think I think the greatest thing that could come from this, and I really mean this, in order to really, Hollywood needs to be led, and they need to see the opportunity. Wouldn't it be wonderful if this book cracks the New York Times bestsellers list because everyone out there went out and purchased it? I think that would be a wonderful thing. It's a great way
Let's
to
do it.
love to George. So for those of you who didn't win those two books, get out there, pre-order, and let's get this on the New York Times bestseller list. So maybe someone in Hollywood with vision and some guts will want to option the property, which I do believe will happen, and you'll get to see it on the big screen in a few years, or small screen if they decide to take it that way. So go order your copy.
Absolutely.
One of these people that love George, right, Chris? That you mentioned.
Yeah, buy the book. I mean, look, it's $25, and it's a hardcover. It's around $25.
And it's Romero.
And it's Romero.
And it's Romero and Daniel. So
And Daniel.
It's thick, so you're getting your money's worth.
How many pages do we have?
650 some.
That is a thick book. That's awesome.
That'll keep you guys busy through COVID. So come on.
Keep you entertained. It'll keep you entertained. I'm going to go ahead and put the reviews up again because I'm super impressed. Especially, we got Joe Hill and Todd Barker endorsing this book, and there's a bunch of other reviews out there. So you're not going to go wrong. I mean, you're getting a book that has been reviewed very well. So make sure you get a copy, right, guys?
Yep.
All right.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We do appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Daniel, if you need anything, let us know. Glad to have you on.
Hey, anytime. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, you as well.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. And thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, guys. Well, y'all have a good day.
Be safe.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Stay scared.
All right.
Stay scared.
All right.
Man,
so
Daniel sounds like a person from our own heart. Hearing him talk about his past, it really echoed me growing up on Romero and being, scared by Barker books. That was kind of me in a nutshell too. It's right.
Yeah.
Same thing.
And I grew up in a small town as well, and I surrounded by cornfields. Only it was in Texas, so I can definitely relate to being that kid, and that kind of blew my mind when he said his mom was a horror movie fan. My mom was too, and she used to take me to see all the movies that I saw as a kid. So I can't imagine though. Of course he's a professional author, but for me that would have just blown my mind. I would have never been able to finish a book for one of my one of your idols. One of my idols. Hey, I want to thank Robert Kowalowski. He just became a Patreon. Thank you very
thanks,
much.
Robert.
Yeah, and Eludi 723 has resubscribed Prime for 2 months in a row. So thank you.
In our Patreons, we did a Patreon show last night for our patrons on the career of George Romero. So we kind of talked through some of his early stuff. Went through some of his commercials he made, some of his other, lesser known movies, like There's Always Vanilla, which I like. And so if you guys are a Patreon, you missed that, you can see it on the Patreon page. So we love us some George.
Yeah, and we also have a John Carpenter episode where we did a career retrospective for John. So you can become a Patreon for as little as $7 and get those exclusive episodes. And we have a lot of fun with all the current patrons getting on there and chatting and doing the show. We just have a great time, and we want to thank everybody for joining us there.
Thank everybody for joining us there, and thank guys for joining us here. Whatever platform you're on, Twitch, YouTube, whatever you're on, we thank you guys, and we appreciate you.
Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to tonight. We have another free Prime Twitch watch party. And we're watching Ice Cream Man with Clint Howard. This ought to be a lot of fun.
Get your ice cream and beer ready, guys. You better have some ice cream and come and join us. It's Ice Cream Man.
Exactly.
We're not screwing around today.
We are not screwing around. It's going to be a lot of fun. Anytime you need information on the show, go to frightmarehq.com. And you can get all the information there. What else do we need to talk about, Charles, before we
that's
sign out?
Kind of our big stuff. Just want to thank everybody who participated in our auction. We did raise a lot of money for Urban Cares last Sunday. What was our final total, Loyd? It was something over $1,700, right? $1,700 we raised?
Yeah, almost $1,800 that we are donating to Urban Cares. So thank you guys for your participation in that auction. It was fantastic.
And, if this is the first time you're joining us, we do go live every Saturday at the same time with a guest. We also go live Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And we do a year retrospective in horror. We've done a lot of those already. We've done every year of the 80s. Those are available on YouTube and Twitch. And we're going to be in 1972 on the next show. So it should be a lot of fun.
What was I going to say? We did 1980, like you mentioned, but we just started 1970. The 70s. So we do 1 year per show. So like Charles said.
1 year per show.
Yeah, like Charles said, we're up to 1973. And you can watch all of those anywhere Twitch or YouTube.
YouTube. Yeah, we went through the 80s. That was about 10 shows. It's a nice little chunk of watch, but you'll learn a lot about us stuff you maybe haven't seen. Me and Loyd like some random stuff sometimes that we pull out, so there's no telling.
Yep. We do. I'm trying to think, is there anything else besides tonight's show? We are working on next Saturday's guest. I have a couple of leads here, and it should be fun, so keep your eyes peeled to see who our next Saturday guest is. Saturday, 2 p.m. Central Time.
2 p.m. Central Time. And I think coming up next Sunday, we're going to do another show with Arrow. We're planning that with them.
Oh, yeah.
Next Sunday, August the 9th. It should be August 9th, right?
I believe it is. Or is
I got to
it
throw it up to a reminder, guys. But August 9th.
Oh, Sunday, August 9th, yeah.
Yeah, so that's coming up. I'll put an event up soon, but it's going to be 12 Central Time because they're in London, so they're far ahead. And what we're going to talk about is not really Arrow movies that are upcoming because we did a lot of Arrow in the last show. We're going to talk about some UK horror. So we're going to do this thing on the video nasties pandemic in the 80s. So we're going to talk about some of that from, the people at Arrow. Mike Hewitt from Arrow knows that. He was around for that. So it'd be fun to talk about that sort of video nasties pandemic and some of the movies that, were affected by that. So more educational horror next Sunday. So feel free to join us. We have a great time.
We do. We have a blast. Well, I think that's about it. Last but not least, thank you all for joining us. We appreciate it. We love you very much. You've been watching Frightmare HQ.
We do. We do love you. I love you too, Loyd.
Oh, I love you too, Charles. And your sexy
You make me twinkle. You make me twinkle.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. My name is Loyd Cryer, and I am with...
It's Charles Doze. I'm here.
Thank you, guys, and we'll see you tonight. Peace.
Yeah, and order that book.
Order the book. Yep. Links are in the description. All right.
Yeah,
Signing out
thanks,
now.
guys.